philosophies and their beliefs. So one of the things that I keep learning is how to not make assumptions about people, even folks in my own tradition who spent most of their life in a Presbyterian or UCC setting. And to recognize that we're all very different, and we're going to be different from day to day. If there are 2 billion Christians in the world, there are 2 billion Christianities. And I think that's helped in my interfaith work too, because it's helped me kind of go beyond that, the golden rule. If you've all heard of the golden rule, it's almost every axial age religion from 800 BCE and Confucian life philosophy to Islam has a form of the golden rule. But I think what we're called to these days is something a little harder, what we're calling the platinum rule. Have you heard of it? So the platinum rule is that we should treat others the way they want to be treated. Can you see how infinitely more difficult that is? Not just to treat others the way you want to be treated. You have to actually get to know another person to know how they want to be treated. And not make assumptions about one day to the next. So that's one of the ways that I try to live out my faith.
So the question, right, how does religion affect your life outside of practice? I think the difficult part for me to answer this question is that I don't think there is any life outside of practice in a Jewish context. Right, Jewish tradition and Jewish law deals with every aspect of our lives. So there are specific blessings that you can say when you wake up in the morning before you go to the bathroom, that the blessing is about, right? You're grateful that your body's working the way that it should work. Right, there's blessings that people say before you eat, and it depends on which kind of food. Right, you have to pay very close attention because, right, it's different than if you pulled it out of the ground or you plucked it off the tree. So there isn't really a time where there isn't an attempt to be very much in the moment and recognizing what's going on and trying to feel gratitude and appreciation for right, what's going on in our lives and the life that's going around us. Obviously, there is ritual, right? Specific kinds of ritual time, and there's holidays, and there's times where specific kinds of interactions and actions take place that don't take place on a regular basis. But that ultimately, Judaism takes a look at all of the ways that we are and tries to infuse a sense of sacredness in every aspect of life.
Yeah. Going back around this way. One of the things that students, not only at Athenian, but a lot of schools these days, face a lot of those that prescribe to a particular religion or are associated with the religion, face a lot of bullying in this day and age. In a lot of progressive schools and secular spaces, because it's seen as, oh, you're not as intellectual because you follow a religion. And so the spirit of these next two questions come out of that. What are the biggest challenges facing your religion, and what is the most challenging aspect of the religion for you? So if we could start us off on those.
It's interesting. So I had a different thought when I read the question versus sort of reacting to what you just said, which I appreciate. Because I do think that I think as sort of a liberal religious tradition, we often people will often rather gravitate to the secular kinds of ways of looking at things than gravitate to the religious ways of looking at things. And therefore we have this kind of break where if you tell somebody that you're religious, then they think that they come up with all kinds of ideas about who you are and what you must believe. And I think one of the challenges then is to figure out and to feel a sense of pride in recognizing, right, the kinds of things that we do and the ways that we are in the world are absolutely from our religious tradition or from Judaism, and to feel a sense of pride in that, and recognition that is, right, that is a way of being in the world, and separating that from our own prejudices, perhaps about what, very extremist kind of religious traditions are like. In a Jewish context, we also always, we have external concerns always. Anti-Semitism has been, right, it's rooted in the history of the Western world. And at the same time, we always have, from within, a lot of criticism around who we are and the way that we do things. And so and that's a constant. That's not even in this time and place. Some of the anti-Semitic things are are in the media much more than they have in the past. But it's a constant kind of challenge on the one hand to react to the world around us, and on the other hand, some of the internal struggles and how we wrestle with that and how we maintain our continuity through that.
So I think colonialism is the biggest challenge to progressive Christianity. And in my preaching and in my exegesis of the scriptures and the teachings of Jesus, a lot of what I do is helping people recognize in the teachings themselves something that's antithetical to free market capitalism and more towards creating a culture of sharing and a culture of cooperation rather than hyper-individuality and competition. And so in so many ways, especially Western, but almost every form of Christianity has been influenced by becoming a part of the Roman Empire. And that colonialism sometimes even gets expressed in the way missionaries do their work, more as saving souls rather than saving bodies. So I'm happy to be a part of two different denominations that have changed the way we do mission, more around education and hospitals and disaster relief, rather than feeling as if we have to save people's souls. We primarily do work saving people's bodies.
Well, it's a two-part question, and Sikhs in the eastern part of the world and the western part have suffered a lot of persecutions. And if you all know, Sikh wears a turban, and colonization happened in that part of the world about 250 years ago. And we have moved all over the world, and due to the turban, I think there has been a lot of persecution for the Sikhs, and especially recent years in the US, especially after 9/11 attack. It's one religion that has come under a lot of attacks. But that aside, as far as some of the, what the question was, I thought the question was how challenging aspects of the religion for you. As far as the challenging aspect of the religion for myself or for any Sikh, Sikhism requires us to be absolutely 100% selfless. It's to the service of all humanity. Like that should be your living daily breath. And yet we have to live in this world where we have to work. We have to feed ourselves. We have this daily choice. So how do we absolutely every breath when we take, we absolutely think of each human as being part of the man race, the one race, the mankind race, no other race. Everybody is to be treated equally and has to be thrown into this world with selfless service for humankind and humanity. So at times as a Sikh it becomes very challenging. How do you live? A third of us has to be dedicated to selfless service, taking care of other humans. And that kind of becomes an issue for a lot of us. And you start wondering, how is it possible that I'm supposed to be serving everybody, treating everybody equally, making sure I treat my child the same way as I treat you, and no difference, because you are part of the same human race as I am. And yet, on a daily basis, have to, do other chores that allows me to live and survive. So that's one massive challenge. The other is Sikhism tells us not to believe in any religion, to pursue truth and beyond that, nothing else. And yet, if I am a practicing Sikh, I am actually wearing a turban, not me personally, but you have to be a Sikh. And yet I'm supposed to have no religion. And I have a religion. So it sometimes, as a Sikh, feels very contradictory that I'm supposed to have no religion and to believe in each one of the religions around me and to believe everybody created equally, and yet I do have a religion, which is Sikhism, and I have a foundation. I have to follow 5 virtues. I have to pursue the truth. I have to pursue contentment and connection to my source. I have to be compassionate. I have to be humble and be a nobody. I cannot be anybody. I have to be a nobody. And more than else, I have to love everyone so around. Sometimes just that virtue and the fact that I have to survive becomes kind of overwhelming. So as a Sikh, sometimes I feel really, why all of it on me? And how do I not be religious and yet I am religious? It's very confusing sometimes to be a Sikh.
As a Catholic, what I've seen so far is this identity. In the Catholic Church, we see the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But now there's a self-Trinity, me, myself, and I. Everything is revolved around what do I believe in that, where can I show to the world? And I think that's even the tough part too, going to the next question is, even within the Catholic Church, is the term liberal and conservative. Well, I can be liberal conservative too, because I have some of my priest friends says I spend too much time at the bowling alley. Well, I love bowling. They like to watch plays. I'll fall asleep in the first 5 minutes. Or it's the term, how do we use it in our lives? Because I think there's going to be liberal individuals, there's going to be conservatives, depending on who you are. Not within the church, but even our political understanding. There's going to be liberal, conservative. There's some things I don't agree with, there's some things I do agree with. But that's why we have the Holy Trinity to help us to journey in our faith to better understand who we are as Catholic Christians.
I'll try to be really quick. I think the most challenging pieces of Buddhism are, as a couple of people have said, the ego, and rather than taking Buddhist practices of compassion or seeing suffering as a global thing, individual Buddhists are talking about their own suffering and, how can I be really good to you as opposed to their suffering globally, and how can I make a difference in my larger community and not just with myself? Like, how do I relieve my suffering? And I think that's problematic. I also think that when we lost Tibet, and there's just fewer and fewer places where the tradition where it started have a lot of people, and so it's bifurcating Western Buddhism versus Eastern Buddhism. So to me, it starts to get really diluted and reflecting. Oftentimes, when religions move, as I'm sure you've studied, they take on, especially Islam, they take on the culture of where they are in a good way. But I think taking on the Western culture as a Buddhist can really dilute the idea of relieving suffering of all sentient beings, not just an individual. And as an interfaith person, I think the biggest challenge I have is people want to gather in interfaith spaces and then dilute everyone's individual religion so that we can all agree, we can all look to the golden rule, and we can all have something in common. And I think we lose both the agnostics and the atheists and the beauty of each of these individual religions in an attempt to agree. And I just don't see, it's like putting you guys in uniforms, right? I mean, it happens, and there's a benefit, I suppose, but I don't see that in spirituality, and so I think that's a challenge for me that I have to keep speaking.
While we were sitting here, two people came into the room. One is trying to leave, but I'm not going to let him leave.
Get back.
I want to introduce Matt Zahner, who's a teacher in a middle school, and who's been instrumental in helping to make sure we have Monotheism Day, looking at the Abrahamic branches, and Matt has partnered with Temple Sinai for years and helped bring students and help make this event possible in a lot of ways. So I want to acknowledge Matt and all the work he's done over the years. Also, Eric now is the head of school here. And one of the things when I mentioned to you that a lot of progressive schools they have that tension. One of the things that Dini did a few years back is create an interfaith space under his leadership. And it's one of the only spaces you go to all these independent schools in the Bay Area, and public schools and charter schools, they don't have interfaith spaces. And thankfully, Athenian has one. And so it takes that kind of leadership to make that happen. Just want to acknowledge that as well.
Is there a polytheist day?
Is there one, Eric? Can we have one? What's going on?
And I think we still have work to do to make
Or pagan
independent-
day.
to make independent